Our speaker today is Maria White, who is a recognized leader in the diversity and inclusion field. She has worked with over a dozen Fortune 500 CEOs, hundreds of senior leaders, and thousands of managers, supervisors, and individual contributors throughout North America and Europe. She is the founder and CEO of Inclusity. Okay, Inclusivity. I got on that one. Which she started in 2013 to pursue a new approach in diversity and inclusion. With her staff, she facilitates in-depth change management, strategic culture change, leadership development, coaching, and consulting. I understand she is also a brand new Rotarian, having just joined the Toledo Rotary Club. And technically, this is her first Rotary meeting. Next week will be her first Rotary meeting in Toledo. We look forward to your presentation, Maria, and we've made a contribution to Rotary International's Polio Plus Fund as a way of saying thanks to speaking to us today. As I welcome her to the podium, I want to remind you, if time permits, for questions. I will be out in the audience with a microphone as our program is being recorded. Thank you and welcome, Maria.
Buenos días. Me llamo María del Carmen Teresa Arcocha y López de Blanco, and I am living proof that when it comes to diversity, sometimes what you see is not what you're going to get. So I was born in Havana, Cuba. My full name, María del Carmen, María del Carmen is my given name, my saint's name, and then Teresa was my confirmation name. Arcocha was my father's name, and in Latin countries, we are not only our father, but of our mother as well, so that's the Y López part. And then I married, ironically, a man named Bill White. That's the de Blanco. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to be here today. If this day is any indication of this club's inclusiveness, then you all have absolutely nothing to worry about in terms of your future growth and development, and your future growth and development in the area of diversity and inclusion. Today, my goal is to share with you some of my learning and experience and some helpful hints, I think, for how to become a more inclusive and diverse organization. So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about how to embrace a culture of inclusion in your club. I am so grateful to Teresa, who about 6 months ago now, she and I met because we had the privilege of working together at American Family Insurance. And as Jason mentioned, I started my own inclusion and diversity company just 5 years ago, but prior to that, I spent over 30 years working in the diversity and inclusion space. I started my career at Procter & Gamble right out of college, and after a stint in sales and marketing management, became the organization's first Hispanic marketing manager. And you're going to hear a little bit about that and why it's so important to connect your business results to diversity and inclusion as you embark on this journey. It's very, very important that you have a vision for how diversity and inclusion can actually make you more successful. If you do it because it's the right thing to do from a heart perspective, that's fantastic, but it probably isn't enough. So you as a Rotary, I know, have, under Teresa's fabulous leadership, have created a business case for why this is the right thing to do for your membership and your future. And all of you who are running organizations need to know that that's the same thing for you, that you need to kind of keep that in mind. As I look over here at the four-way test, I look at things like, is it fair? Okay, is it fair and concerned? Is it the truth? Okay. Will it build goodwill, and will it be beneficial to all concerned? And today, hopefully, I'm going to share a little bit about how diversity and inclusion initiatives help you to build goodwill and include every single person that you want to reach out to. So, I have a little pusher thing here. Okay, here we go. Why the need for inclusivity? Okay, what I can tell you is that over my last 30 years of working in this space, that the focus on diversity, unfortunately, has led to some initiatives that were focused on numbers, and we're also making assumptions that it was differences that we needed to focus on. And what that focus led to was a lot of conflict and misunderstanding. Have any of you ever experienced any diversity training or initiatives in your organizations? Raise your hand for me. Okay. How many of you just love the experience? Raise your hand for me. Yeah, okay, that's what I'm talking about right there, okay? I mean, in the past, what ended up happening was we unintentionally excluded some groups. And as a result of that, we really have failed to make lasting change, and especially culture change in organizations as a whole. And in addition to that, failed to make lasting changes in leadership. And I'm a big proponent of the fact that it's the leaders of the organization that really role model for others the way and the behavior that you need to exhibit. And so if we're not kind of advancing folks of all differences into organizational leadership, then we are very likely not representing folks who need a role model and need someone to follow and to be able to role model for them the behaviors and the experiences that they need to, all right? So that's what caused me to form my own company and to start this focus on inclusion. But one of the things that I think is important is this saying by a Latino philosopher, George Santayana, who says, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And so today what I want to do is I want to present to you a little bit of history. I want to take you through a journey in the diversity and inclusion space to help you to understand what got us to where we are and where I believe we need to go, where our future needs to lead us in order for us to be successful. On your table, you're going to find a little note card like this. There's 8 of them, one of them for each of you. And you're also going to find a pen that you can jot down some notes if you'd like to. And after the session is over, if you would like me to send you either my slides or some of the information included in my slides, then I will be happy to do that if you want to just drop off your business card with me, okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the history, okay? How many of you, and I know there's at least one person in the room now, Joe, who started their career in the 50s and 60s, right around that era? Is that about right? In it. Joe says, not around it, in it. Okay, awesome. If any of the rest of you joined organizations back in the 1950s and 60s, you joined an organization whose themes were all about the company man. And it was men because at that point, women were stay-at-home moms, or if they were in organizations, they were in very much of support roles, like secretaries and nurses and teachers. They weren't considered to be fit for leadership at the time. And we also made a contract with folks, our organizations, that if you joined the organization and you showed up and you did what you were supposed to do, then you would have employment for life. And what that meant was that we were creating a traditional norm, okay, in most organizations. What, Joe? Exhibit 1A. Is that you? Right on. And that these organizations were largely white male, not because of exclusion in general in the organizations, but because that was what the pool of the applicants were at the time, okay? And this is super important for you to understand, and especially if you are a woman or a person of color, or you're gay, or you're different in any other way. What you need to understand is that the mantra back in those days, the success formula, if you will, was work hard and you'll get ahead. So the only way to really differentiate between people back in those days was where you were educated, how much experience you had, and how hard you worked, because we were similar in many other ways. Whoops, didn't want to do that. Boy, I'm dangerous with this little thing. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. Here we go. So the intended outcomes were that we had outstanding productivity. And if you talk, my husband is a PhD economist, and I won't tell you where he works because you won't like that university, I'm guaranteeing. Let's just say they are scarlet and gray. I know. But anyways, he's a Purdue fan, so, you don't have to worry about that. But needless to say, the intended consequences were that at that time in the 50s and 60s, if you look back in economic history, the United States was by far the most productive country in the world. And we had success in the growth of industry unlike any other country in the world. But the unintended consequence was that there was unintentional exclusion for people who were women or people of color color, many times gay, but if they were gay, they were probably not out because it wasn't a safe place for them to be. So in about I want to say starting in the 70s and then into the early 80s when I joined Procter & Gamble, we moved into an era called assimilation. And if you look into assimilation, what you see, and by the way, the little pictures kind of demonstrate, what's important is that back in homogeneity, we did have diversity. You see it from some, difference in shading, difference in sizes, difference in power and control, and difference in the bow tie. That's the manager, right? But what you see in assimilation is that people like me start joining organizations. And what starts happening there is something called affirmative action, which meant that we needed to start representing women and people of color. But what we need to remember is that we were still in organizations that had very traditional norms, while we were starting to introduce visible diversity into those organizations. And I remember back in the day that the success formula was still work hard and you'll get ahead. But the other piece of it was be like us. You need to, if you're different in any way, you need to assimilate into the culture that's there. Now, I remember I joined Procter & Gamble in 1980, and I was the first female and first Latina to join my business district, and I was going to be the first woman promoted to district manager in my entire business unit, because there just weren't any women back in those days, right, in the workforce. But what happened to me, I remember, was they wanted me to change. They wanted me to change everything about me. They wanted me to dress like them. There was a book called John Malloy's Dress for Success. Do y'all remember that? Okay, yeah, all the women are going, yep. I remember shopping at Joseph A. Banks because it was the only store that carried women's clothing that was like men's clothing. And they had these little bow ties. Do you remember those? Those string bow ties. So I used to buy men's small shirts with the button-down collars, and then I would wear the little string bow ties. I would buy navy blue suits with skirts because we weren't allowed to wear pants back then. And I even found a pair of wingtip pumps. And I would go into my stores marching in like we used to call ourselves proctoids. It was so funny because we all looked alike. We all talked aloud. We learned how to assimilate, right? Well, after a while, what you realize is that assimilation causes you to kind of give up on yourself. It causes you to give up on your uniqueness. And you start being resentful. And what I remember thinking to myself is, these mean white men, they just want power and control. They just want me to be like them. They just want me to give up who I am and be like them. And what I realized many, many, many years later is, actually, that's not the case. They really weren't being mean. They really were trying to help me be successful. Because you see, they knew that the success formula that they had used in the past was working. And this was just a huge aha moment for me when I realized this in the early 2000s, that they were coaching me and asking me to change to be like them because they wanted to help me be successful. Okay, I didn't get it back then. But once I got that, it was like a huge shift for me, that these white men were not bad people. They weren't mean people. They didn't want control. They wanted to support me and help me. So what ended up happening was that the intended consequences were people like me, we changed and we adjusted, and then we were successful. I was promoted 3 times within 5 years at P&G. Okay, I eventually became the organization's first Hispanic marketing manager. And when we get to diversity here in a minute, we'll see how my differences started to be utilized to the advantage of the company. But up until this point, what happened was that the unintended consequence was that if they couldn't change, if diverse workers either couldn't change enough or weren't willing to change, then they weren't successful. And what you started seeing happening was in the 1990s, especially women started leaving corporate America in droves to start their own companies. And by the mid-90s, if you look back into the media, what you see is that corporate America is starting to realize we've got this huge brain drain that's leaving our organizations. And women and people of color are starting companies. They're being very successful. And we need to do something to change or we're going to miss out on this. And so what happens is we come into the era of diversity. And very quickly, diversity stood for let's celebrate differences and create opportunities. But I call it the focus was really on food, fun, and flags. Okay, let's have fun. Let's eat different food. Let's have Mexican American Day. Let's have parties, and we're all going to value everybody's difference, okay? But unfortunately, what happened was we started focusing on what people looked like. We started focusing on race and gender, and we started rewarding and hiring people for visible diversity. So we never actually got the full benefit of the diversity because we were only doing it kind of on a surface level. So what happened was we were told in those days, and what you'll see in my picture down here, because over here to the left you have a white man, but all of a sudden you see that being a white man was not okay. Because what you see is who's being successful here is a person of color, okay? So that white man then starts trying to change and eventually is not succeeding in organizations, because what's happening is we're so focused in organizations on promoting women and minorities because we feel like we need to do that in order to be diverse, that we lost sight of what it was we were trying to do. And frankly, Inclusity was born. Inclusity, I know that's hard to say. In fact, we copyrighted the word. We made the word up. So Inclusity means in essence, we believe that you start with inclusion. So the INCLU, include, is about inclusion, and then the SITY is about diversity, the city of diversity. What we believe is that if you focus on inclusion first, if you focus on the behaviors of inclusion rather than the other way around, what will happen is you'll create an environment where diversity will come. Diversity will feel welcomed. They'll feel included, and they'll want to stay. Instead of what's happened with the focus on diversity, which is the unintended consequences is that white men started feeling like they were disadvantaged and like they were being discriminated against, by the way, and they were. So I'll tell you just a real quick story because it's really pertinent to this. I was working for another consulting firm at the time, and I remember being in an organization that I'd worked in for years, and a young white male came up to me and said, "Maria, I'm really getting frustrated with this whole diversity thing." And I said, "I don't understand. Help me understand." And he said, "Well, I've been in this organization as a supervisor for 10 years. Everyone in this organization, including all the women and the minorities, would tell you that I am the best qualified person for this manager job that just opened up. So I went to HR to put my name in the hat to be considered. And what they told me was not to bother to apply because they had to put a woman in the job." Is anybody surprised by this? No, you shouldn't be. And what he said to me, I'll never forget, is, "Maria, that's reverse discrimination." And I said to him, "No, it isn't. It's discrimination. That's discrimination. If anyone is denied an opportunity on the basis of race or gender or orientation or anything else, it's not reverse anything." And then at that point, I knew that we had failed, that the diversity initiatives, while they were well-intended, they had not achieved what we were trying to achieve. And I knew I had to start Inclusity because I knew that we needed a different way of approaching this work. This work shouldn't be about making people feel guilty, ashamed, or bad. It shouldn't be about saying that people of color or women are better than. And it certainly should not be about making anybody feel like they're not part of the diversity, because everybody is part of diversity. Say after me, "I am part of diversity. I am part of diversity." Every single person in this room is different from the person next to them. Research shows us that even identical twins, okay, who supposedly have the same DNA, have significant differences in them. If identical twins are different from one another, you are, okay? So that's the thought you need to go into, is everybody needs to be a part of this, okay? Because what happened with diversity initiatives traditionally was that some majority workers started to feel discriminated against and not included. And frankly, some of the diverse workers started feeling burned out and overworked and just didn't want to be a part of this anymore. The initiatives lacked energy, okay? They lacked caring. And that's why Inclusity was born. Because inclusion, what we mean by inclusion is that the only thing that people need to have in common is their shared organizational values and the work behaviors that we desire to have in our organizations. Those must all be the same, okay? Because our values and our behaviors, in other words, our culture, needs to represent what we stand for. Beyond that, nothing else needs to be the same. Okay, what we need to focus on is on intentional inclusion versus unintentional exclusion. By the way, do most of you wake up in the morning, tell me, if you wake up in the morning and as you're putting on your pants or your skirt or whatever, you think to yourself, I can't wait to mess with people today. I can't wait to make people feel bad. I can't wait to mess up their day. Is there anybody in this room that feels that way? No. Let me tell you that 99% of all exclusion that occurs, all mistakes that happen related to diversity are unintentional. They're good people like you and I making mistakes because we don't know better. And if we knew better, we would do better. And so that's what my mission is in the world, is to help people to know better so that we do better. Because all of us want things to be better for ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, and the people that we work with and spend our time with. So in inclusion, real quick, we focus on maximum productivity. So however you can get to your maximum productivity and make sure that you don't affect anybody else's negatively, that's all good. Whatever it takes to do that, it's all good. But mind you, you have to make sure that you're not getting in anybody else's way. Okay, if what you're doing to be successful makes someone else unsuccessful, then that means we're not succeeding. We got to figure out a way to do it together. Okay? We focus on individuals. We believe that everyone is diverse, okay? And we make decisions on our shared values and the behaviors that we expect. So what we'll do is behave in ways that allow true individuality and diversity to emerge. And what will that do? That will provide us team members that are fully engaged, right, that have a voice, that feel heard, that feel appreciated, and they can contribute to their fullest potential. So the bottom line is, Inclusity is about productivity and about letting people be their most productive selves, whether in the Rotary or in your organization. So I want to give you we've got a little bit of time, and I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes, okay, to show you how this works, because I think it's important that you understand, how do we initiate a conversation? This is called the Elements of Individuality, and it might be a little hard for you to read, but basically it entails all of the differences or individuality elements that could be available. Actually, not all, but many of them. So what I want you to do is I want you to turn to somebody at your table, hopefully someone you don't know as well as some of the others, and I want you to just share one thing about you that they don't know that is important to you. Just one thing. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do this. Okay, 2 minutes, so 1 minute a person. Ready? Go. Come on back. Come on back. So I love this exercise. Usually we have a little bit more time, and I'm able to let you share more than one thing quickly. But of course, you could always do this anytime, right? So did you learn something new about the person sitting next to you? Yes. And even those of you that knew the person next to you, did you still learn something new? Isn't it amazing? Diversity is so amazing. What did you notice about the energy in the room when you started doing this? It got way louder. It just went crazy, didn't it? Because the reality is that when you focus on people and let them know that you care and listen to them, that's how you build diversity and inclusion. That's what we're going for in this club, is in an environment where everyone feels like they can contribute to their best potential. So we're going to give you an opportunity, by the way, to spend a little bit more time on this topic because, that you already did that. Okay, tomorrow night at 5:30, you've got an opportunity to come back to this hotel and to be led by Dr. Larkin and by Brenda Gonzalez in a fabulous discussion about these 10 conscious inclusion action ideas that are on the back of your card. These are some ideas that our organization has put together that over the years what we've learned is that if you engage in these behaviors, you will become more inclusive. And all we're going to ask you to do is to pick one thing that you would like to work on and then work on that for a while. And then after you do that for a while and you get good at it, because by the way, practice makes better, and inclusion is a practice. Okay, most of us are not born inclusive. As you go through training in this area, what you realize is that human beings are unintentionally exclusive by design. Okay, we are designed, our brains are designed to exclude. And then we actually have to work on being inclusive because it doesn't come naturally for most of us. So if you practice inclusion, you'll get better at it because it's a skill, just like many other skills. If you want to learn to play the piano as beautifully as the person did right here, you have to practice, right? You didn't just walk up to a piano, right, and start playing the piano. You had to practice and practice. It's the same thing here. So please join us tomorrow night. It's going to be a fabulous event. So the question is, what will you do to intentionally include? There are 10 things here that you can do to help you to be more inclusive. And tomorrow you'll have an opportunity to talk more about it. If you can't come, that's okay. Just select one of these 10 things, and you'll see a little bit of information on the back of the card, and then decide to do it. And maybe even ask one of your fellow Rotarians to kind of be a buddy and help you do it along with you, okay? So thank you very much for being with me today. And I think that we've got some time we got about 5 minutes left for questions.
Being the fellow Cuban in the room.
Yay! Mi hermano.
It was just a coincidence. My daughter, who's a freshman in college, was calling me while your presentation was going. So I took a picture of this and sent it to her.
Oh, yay.
And the interesting thing is, part of her package in going to school was a diversity scholarship.
Yay!
And then I had a niece who got got a job with Mars through a diversity workshop.
Yeah,
which is kind of
cool.
interesting.
Very cool.
The item 6, because I will not be able to go tomorrow.
Yes, yes.
Just out of curiosity, in a small organization.
Yes.
How do you deal with this? Because it's a lot different than a P&G.
I know it. And I am a part of a small organization. So what I would tell you, Victor, is that you have to be very conscious to the fact that our likelihood is to hire and promote in our own image, that we value those positive things in us, so we go out looking for the positives in us instead of looking actively for the things that we don't have that are positives in others. So what I would tell you is that as you recruit and hire, think about all these different kinds of diversity, elements of diversity, things like thinking style. If you're a linear thinker, you need to get contextual thinkers in your organization. If you are 40 years old, you need some 20-year-olds in your organization. You need to seek out that which is different from you so that you can get balance in your organization. I know it's difficult, but you can do it. Okay? Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
On number 8 that you are asked for feedback, there is a statement that may set people for a failure. And that one is when I ask that, what can I do better? In an organization, there are as many people are there are a number of ways that they can do things different. And that people get upset that, well, I give you the feedback, you didn't do nothing about it.
Yeah. So it's very important when you ask people for feedback that you let them know that you're interested in their opinion and that you'll consider their opinion, but that if it doesn't fit for you, that you may choose not to actually accept and integrate that feedback. Now, know that you still can tell them, I really appreciate your perspective. And you can also tell them, here is why I don't feel like I can or I won't change it. It's part of my belief system. It's part of my values, or it's part of who I am, and I can't. So what'll happen is that they'll begin to understand a little bit more about why you are the way you are, and hopefully they'll start accepting you a little bit differently. But what I would tell you is 8 out of 10 times, usually for me, when somebody gives me feedback, they have a point. And 8 out of 10 times, I will tell you that I have to take that feedback and I have to work on it. I won't be perfect. I can't change like that. And people have to know that I'm going to have to practice and get better. But I let them know I'm going to work hard on that and I'm going to try to get as better as I can. And in the meantime, I just ask you to be patient with me and try to accept this while I try to change. Give me constant feedback so I can constantly get better. So it's a two-way street, but you're right. Feedback is scary for people. The other piece is if you're in the dominant position, don't expect that folks and subordinates are going to automatically tell you the truth about what you're doing. So if you ask for feedback and people constantly say, oh, you're perfect, you're great, you're wonderful, that's probably a problem, okay? Unless you have everybody in the organization that's just like you, that means that they probably don't feel safe giving you feedback. So you have to keep on trying and letting people know that it's really okay, that you won't hurt them in any way when they tell you something about you is not working for them. Okay? One more? Do we have time? One more.
Okay, quick one, Ron.
So for many of us, we're involved in organizations like this, volunteer organizations, which are different than the cultures that occur in a workplace. So maybe you can relate to that a little bit about the differences between volunteer organizations and workplace cultures.
So really, there aren't a whole lot. The biggest difference I would tell you is that in work organizations, typically there's an HR organization that kind of polices behavior, and unacceptable behaviors are managed through HR. In this organization, I'm not sure how behaviors are policed. And so, if they are at all. I mean,
Okay.
yeah. So I would say that that's the biggest thing, is that in organizations like this, you have to rely on feedback from each other to help you grow and learn. And so hopefully over time, and as you build trust, you'll build that rapport. Okay?
Thank you very much, Maria.
I will let you know how it goes in, hopefully you'll want me back. And if you invite me back, I'll let you know how it's going in the Toledo Rotary.
So remember the dinner, if you're interested, yellow forms on your table. We are adjourned.